Do you remember that old MasterCard campaign way back in the 90s? There are some things money can't buy, but for everything else, there's MasterCard. They were onto something, which of course seems fairly obvious at this point, given their stock is up about 10,000% since they ran those ads versus the S&P up 500% since then. Specifically the question though, what is the price of priceless stuff? And I'm not talking about valueless stuff, the junk up in your attic or in your mother's meaningless collectibles. The truly priceless stuff, memories. What are your best memories worth? Of course, it's easier to put a price tag on things like clothes, cars, or jewelry. Just look at the price tag. But valuing memories is much harder. We all have at least a few memories filed in that priceless folder, and we didn't pay an infinite amount of money for them. But if you look at most of those priceless memories, there was almost always actually a certain amount of money involved. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to invest in things that will hopefully one day become priceless for you. I'll give you 3 reasons why you should be doubling down on your experience investments in retirement. And as well, we'll unpack how one of the keys in retirement is essentially just converting dollars into things that will produce nostalgia for you in the future. Now, we all have those memories, right? Those events where, sure, there was an exchange of dollars, but the experience, and by extension, the memory produced, had an outsized effect on our lives. Maybe it was only the price of the coffee you bought while having a deep conversation with a close friend. Or maybe it was the $15,000 you dropped on that family trip to Europe. One of the wilder stories came out of a client conversation I had recently with an older gentleman. He was in his 80s, and I asked him what one of his favorite Christmas gifts he'd ever received was. Do you want to guess? In his words, it was a mandarin orange that he got when he was just a teenager. It was the first time he'd ever had an orange, and he could only have 2 wedges of the orange, and he had to save the other wedges for his other siblings. The family went out of their way to track down this crazy foreign food, and they splurged to make it happen. Like unthinkable in today's terms, right? But to him, this wasn't just an orange. And even today, every orange that he's had since that orange, it doesn't compare to that first bite of that orange that he had had as a teenager. The hardest things to measure tend to be the most important or the most valuable things in your life. Your relationship with your wife, hard to measure, extremely important. You can't just give her a survey at the end of the quarter and ask how your performance was as a husband, right? Your asset mix, your current income, what's your house worth? Those things all extremely easy to measure, but arguably way less important than your relationship with your spouse. So it's got me thinking, and it kind of made me think of a few things that hopefully can help you look at how to invest in experiences. These things that are super hard to value, because if you do it right, I think these can be one of the smartest financial moves you might ever make. First, let's just realize that memories appreciate while stuff depreciates. Good memories are like appreciating assets. That ski trip that you took might have cost $2,500, but the joy, the experiences, the adrenaline that came from that trip have the potential to become priceless over time. If you're honest and you live long enough, you'll actually find that the best memories actually continue to appreciate the longer that you let them, almost like a good wine or that mandarin orange I just shared. It's why the college years of your youth are often ranked as some of the best years of one's adult life. Now, if you contrast this with like physical items, gadgets, or toys, they tend to lose their economic value over time. And of course, you have capital assets which will increase. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the stuff, right? Entertain me for just a second and try to think of a physical object of material worth that's increased in its importance as you've aged. Sentiment aside, most people struggle to name even one of those items. And by the way, if we haven't ever met, my name is Steve Willems. I'm a wealth advisor here with the Willems Wealth Planning Group out in BC. We started this channel a little while ago to help you think about and plan for your retirement, arranging your investments, your income streams, and ideally having you pay less tax along the way. Now, 2, let's understand that negative experiences can become positive memories. And this is a cool one, right? Because even experiences that were challenging or stressful have the chance to become cherished memories. Studies show that people often look back on difficult experiences with a sense of fondness and accomplishment once they've had the chance to actually reflect on them. And what might have seemed like a rough day at that time can actually turn into a funny or an inspiring story that you might treasure for years. That camping trip as a young family where it just rained nonstop and you suffered through the misery. That hike with your friends where you lost the trail, the plan went out the window and yet you still made it out alive. Or the classic kind of cramming for final exams as a young person back in university, kind of staying up all night playing hockey in the outdoor rink instead of studying. If you're trying to tell a great story at a party, no one wants to hear about the night that you stayed home and watched Netflix, because that's not the memory that counts or the memory that matters. Core memories often carry a piece of adversity to them, right? The fourth trip to Palm Springs starts to feel like the third trip to Palm Springs, but the trip to Europe where you got swindled at the Trevi Fountain, the bags got lost by the airline, or the hotel messed up your booking, or the car rental was a stick shift when you needed an automatic, those are the memories that stick and actually appreciate over time. Now, third, let's understand that shared experiences create bonds. When you invest in experiences, you're not just buying a ticket or booking a trip, you're creating opportunities for meaningful connections. These shared experiences are going to build bonds that potentially might last a lifetime. And unlike comparing cars or toys, shared experiences can bring people together and create friendships that will last that entire lifetime. Now, most people I talk to are looking ahead to retirement. They're not interested in building wealth purely because they want to grow a pile of assets. They're building wealth because they want to have the resources to create great memories down the road, right? If this was an equation, we would write it out like this. The game in the accumulation years is take some income and convert it to assets on your balance sheet. And then as you start thinking about retirement, the game kind of gradually shifts to this, where you're converting assets on your balance sheet into memories that will produce nostalgia. In his book, Die with Zero, Bill Perkins agrees. He says that the business of life is essentially the acquisition of memories. In the end, that's all that there is. Now, to be entirely clear, though, having the money and knowing where to spend it are two completely different things. Many people are afraid to invest in more experiences because they don't actually know if they can afford to. Right? They prefer to err on the side of caution. And this is where having a written, kind of documented financial plan can be invaluable. It can give you permission to spend money on the things that matter the most to you without having to worry or feel guilty. It's essentially guilt-free spending. We'll bake those things into the plan. So if you've been wondering if you can take your grandkid when they turn 16 on a trip somewhere special, right, somewhere to kind of create that unique core memory with them, but you're just not sure if you can swing it financially, you run the plan, you've got the health and the time, but the question is, like, can you afford it? Let's test it. Let's bake it into the plan. Let's look at the numbers, obviously, to be aware of the cost, but acknowledge that for at least two people, this is not necessarily a decision for the net worth statement. It's a qualitative decision. This is going on your emotional balance sheet, a completely different ledger. So as you plan your finances, prepping for retirement, consider allocating more towards creating these memorable experiences. These investments and experiences are going to provide returns on your emotional balance sheet that far exceed their initial cost. And if you don't already have a plan, I'd suggest we talk about how to create one for you that supports a life kind of filled with these rich and lasting memories. Every week we set aside a few time slots to help folks with questions in our YouTube community. So if you'd like to get a hand testing some of those kind of bigger dreams, the best way to confirm if it's actually doable is to actually run your numbers in a comprehensive way. So I'll put a link in the description below if you'd like to grab time on the calendar to kind of get started getting some of those questions answered. I hope that's helpful though. I really love this topic because like everyone has something that's just immediately comes to mind when they think of these priceless memories. I'm curious for you though, like what would be a memory that you wouldn't trade for anything? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. Otherwise, as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.